We're excited to have Peter Denio from the Leadership Roundtable, and we're talking specifically for seasoned campus ministers, people who've been doing the work of campus ministry for a number of years. So, Peter, we're really excited and eager to hear your perspective on planning, assessment, evaluation, staffing, and maybe we could start with the idea of planning. And so we're actually recording this video at the end of an academic year, but whether it's the end or the beginning or even middle, what are some best practices for just looking forward to future academic years and trying to map out what are the activities, the priorities, the things we're going to be doing in that upcoming year?
Yeah. My sense is that for most individuals who are listening to this presentation, that they kind of have a good sense of what are the busy times, the lulls within the calendar year, and my guess is that there's a sense that I have a sense of the ebb and flow of the student body and the academic year in general. I think the one thing that I'd want to offer in terms of planning and thinking about what to do is, in my observation of planning in general, is there's this assumption that, well, this is a low time, so therefore we're not going to do anything, or this is our planning time without programming. And even when college students are not on campus, which nowadays with the academics going year-round and special programs and so on, that just doesn't seem to be the case very often. But also looking at campus ministry broader than the student body population. It's a ministry on a campus setting, but there's always people. So when I think of planning and I think of what could be added in terms of the cycle, is to think of what is the underserved in the times that I'm currently thinking that are, I have a predisposition that it is a time where there's nothing going on. And I think about this in multiple ministry settings, and I've been surprised at when I've been able to offer some type of ministry at a time that's perceived as people aren't here, because there's always people here. So I think that's one of the under-reviewed elements within planning for a campus ministry.
So in other words, if it's summer, it's winter break, it's spring break, you might simplify or dial back some of your offerings. Daily Mass comes to mind,
Sure.
So instead of offering 2 or 3 Masses, you might offer 1.
Sure.
Or instead of your regular hours for your Newman Center, your Catholic Center, your Campus Ministry Center, you might pare them back a little bit, but it doesn't mean you should just go dark completely. It sounds like that's what you're saying.
That's right. It's certainly making the adjustments for the year as we know there is that ebb and flow. But how am I serving the community, whatever that community is, during this time period? Because the reality is that our ministry doesn't end. It just means that we might be doing something differently. And even though we might dial back to 1 Mass, what unique opportunity could we offer for the people who feel like, well, everyone else is gone, but I'm still here? What are we doing for those individuals? I think that could lead to some creative planning and explore areas that maybe haven't been explored in a while.
Let's take the planning piece one step further and talk about strategic planning. Every college or university is inviting, sometimes mandating their campus ministry teams to do strategic planning. What's the current trend in terms of 2-year, 3-year, 5-year? Does anybody do beyond that? And essentially, what's working from what you see at Leadership Roundtable regarding strategic plan?
Yeah, hopefully campus ministries are not confining themselves to a 1-year plan. I mean, that just leads to, in my mind, it just leads to doing the same thing and maybe making modest adjustments. Of course, with any type of strategic plan, the campus ministry wants to have a sense of where it wants to go, and an articulation of that in some type of vision should be clear and present for any of the campus ministers, and ideally most of the leadership, whether it's a student body or leadership, volunteer leadership in whatever capacity, to be able to know that that's a direction. The length of time, I think common pastoral planning practice is to look at a long-term plan, which would be about 3 years, but it's always rolling. So there's an articulated place of where we want to go as a vision. There's some basic elements to say these these are the things that will get us there. And this is how we operationalize it on a year-to-year basis. So the goals are the things that we're doing to get to that vision year upon year. May change, may stay the same. But the rolling idea is that we look at it every year and we're making adjustments to that. And every 3 years or so, we'll say, does this vision still hold for us?
Mm-hmm.
Just to give you an example that I think is helpful, one articulation of a vision might be that the campus ministry might want to call itself and understand itself as the spiritual home for those people on this college campus. Mm-hmm. The question is, well, what does it mean to be a spiritual home? And I think we're going to get into some of this conversation in our time here today. But what are the things that we would do to create this as a feeling of a spiritual home? That directs what we're going to be doing. Another college campus, let's say it's an Ivy League campus, and they might see themselves as really appreciating the Catholic intellectual tradition. Mm-hmm. And for them, they're going to say, so what is the things, if that's the vision, we want to be a beacon on a hill. And we're going to plan things that are going to look and bring us to that direction. Another campus ministry might look at it and say, we want our worship to draw people from all around. Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to direct the long-term planning, and that vision might be set for 3 years and revisited. But year upon year, we're going to look at that and say, did what we decide to do this year get us closer to that vision? If so, let's keep doing it. Mm-hmm. If not, let's modify and think of what else we can do. Okay. And that sets the direction.
That's helpful, very helpful. So many times the direction is informed by feedback. People in the community, people who are participating in campus ministry, even our own team. And a question I often have is, how do we build a culture of feedback with our volunteers, our staff, rather than just, you're great, you have a wonderful faith, everything's fine, and I'll overlook all the flaws and the moments where I got frustrated. How do we build that culture of feedback?
Yeah, great question. And the only way that I know that we can begin to create a real culture, an authentic culture of feedback, if it begins with the leader. And the leader has to invite that feedback first in order for others to be able to follow suit. To be able, especially if there's not a culture of feedback, to start off and to create that environment where it's felt that it's only one directed. Mm-hmm. Doesn't create the environment where it's a trusting environment where we can all be invested in the long-term impact of the ministry. So if you're watching this and you're the leader, model it first by starting off and saying, I'm going to try something different, or I'd like to ask you I'm going to make time with staff or with key volunteers to say, these are my things that I'm looking to do, and I would invite you over time. I will be intentional about asking you at certain moments to give me your feedback. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, the natural tendency for that is for people to see that, wow, our leader's willing to do that. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to receive that because I felt like I was asked for it and I was willing to give the feedback as well, mm-hmm. and more inclined to hear it myself.
And the feedback, it doesn't have to be just once a year. It could be something small if you're the leader, such as I'm an ordained deacon or a priest. Could you give me a sense, how did people receive that homily? And was there something I could have phrased a little bit differently? Let's say you're a lay person and you gave a talk on a retreat or a welcoming orientation or something. Could you just be listening and I'd love to know what you thought of that, and was there something I could have done a little bit differently? So it doesn't have to be these grand painted strokes of feedback. It could be micro bits of feedback, and that could be helpful too, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say there is that sometimes we're in ministry, we could get bombarded with people who feel that they want to give us feedback, and it's the challenge with that is deciphering, is this helpful feedback? Is it valid? Where's it coming from? What are the motivations? And so what I often encourage leadership to do, and anyone, is to be intentional and to ask specific people that you have a trust level with, that you know the people that you're asking have your best interest in mind, and be specific about what you're looking to accomplish, and then intentionally ask for that feedback afterwards. Therefore, it's set aside, it's not random, and it's not from a place that you're not sure where it's coming from. When we do that, it becomes intentional. And as leaders of a campus ministry, we could create that environment by asking our staff or our volunteer leaders to put that as a part of their plan for the year. Identify people, 3 to 5 people, that you're going to ask for feedback, and I'd like to see it. You know, I'd like to see what are the things you're looking to build upon, what kind of outcomes are you looking for, and how often did you meet with them to be able to get that, and then have that person share what that feedback was to you. I mean, that's a much nicer way to be able to help people grow and develop than it all resting on the supervisor, who may or may not even be in the circumstances where they're doing their ministry.
How do you avoid being a micromanager? I know that's a fear of a lot of people in ministry. I don't want to micromanage. They're a grown-up. They know how to do campus ministry. Well, yes, but they still need direction. So how do you avoid being a micromanager?
Yeah, it's a challenge, I think, that all of us find is what's the best way to guide those and empower individuals to fulfill their own ministry. And I don't think I'm going to give easy answers. I think this is going to come over time, Mike, because it depends on the culture of the ministry, the competency of the individuals that you're working with, and their capacity, and that has to be measured per person. I think there's this. There could be this potential hope or sense that everyone's going to be these empowered leaders who are going to be able to, just function on their own with little direction. And depending on where the ministry is, it might need some time, sometimes years, to create the culture where that capacity is possible. But it really has to be, in my sense, has to be done on an individual basis on what the capacity and competency of the individual is. And also, am I articulating clearly what is needed and expected? So in other words, the role of the leader in campus ministry eventually is to create the boundaries, the box that other pastoral ministers can function out of, so that they don't have to go back to me to ask clarifying questions. So it's attending to that box. And what does that box mean? It means things like, what's the overall vision? Do we have a vision? Is it clear for that individual so that they could see that what they're planning is going towards that vision? Oftentimes, if that's not even articulated well, it's very difficult for anyone to be able to say, well, this is what I'd like to do. It becomes my personal interest and passion versus where we're going. Other things that are related to that is, what's the personal preferences of the leader, which is a valid element to add to it, which I think sometimes leaders are afraid to offer. To say, by nature of the fact that I'm responsible for the campus ministry, these are some of my personal preferences that I think you should be aware of, and be clear about it. Therefore, there's no guesswork involved, right? I'd be like, okay, great. This is how this individual wants the ministry to be. It's an express personal preference. It is a preference. It's not a requirement by all ministry. But in order to work in this environment under this leadership, that's what I need to do. We do that in a larger church where there's a bishop, where there's a pastor, as well as the director of campus ministry. They would have those as well. So it's good to be clear about that, to be aware of it as a leader, and to articulate that. Then, of course, there's policies and practices that we want, and that's the box that we build. But sometimes we also have to walk with people to lead them there. So going from being very directive to then creating, well, here's the key metrics that we're looking to achieve, and to the point where eventually the greatest option is for us to say, this is where we're exploring where we want to go. How do you see what you're responsible for fitting into where we want to go, to give total agency? But that takes time.
It takes time. I think it's good counsel for leaders to tell your team your foibles and your preferences, and just identify, look, guys, I'm very picky about this and that. And it might be the cleanliness of the space. It might be the announcements after Mass. It might be the prayers of the faithful. It might be the way a particular retreat works. Whatever it is, it's better to just say it because you're going to be frustrated otherwise. And my experience is that people who get that kind of context of how they're operating, they say, oh, well, he told us or she told us she was picky about this, and there it is. Okay. It just makes for a better experience.
Absolutely.
What about, is it best practice to evaluate a person just at the end of the academic year, midway point in, say, December or January, and at the end of the year? Or should reviews happen every month? That feels like a little too much. Ideas there?
Yeah, I think every employee or anyone that's in key leadership deserves an annual evaluation. It's a best practice. It should be part of all ministry. Even the director of campus ministry should have one of those, hopefully.
Definitely. Yeah.
So everyone should have at least one a year. But there should be, and I don't know if I'd go as far to say as an evaluation. However, having regular opportunities where a supervisor and the person being supervised to have one-on-one conversations is really important. What the time frame of that is will probably depend on the culture of and the necessity of the individuals to meet. Once a month doesn't feel too onerous. I know some organizations that will do it. I know for Leadership Roundtable, we have every other week, and it's a standard format where the supervised create the agenda with specific items that they're going to their supervisor for, but it's also the opportunity for the supervisor to give important feedback about something that's happened in the last 2 weeks. And as a supervisor, I think it's great because that stuff is created, it's memorialized, it's written down ahead of time. Anything that needs to be adjusted can be added to a document, but then it's kept there for both purposes, right? It's not only the supervision of the individual, but what do we need to do together to get the activity done within the ministry? But at the end, once a year, based on clearly identified roles and responsibilities, so a role description's involved with that, and what are the goals, but also the performance outcomes and personal development. All that should be a part of an annual review where both participants contribute to the information, have the conversation, it's memorialized.
And if you're nervous about it, the people who report to you, they're going to be nervous about it.
Yeah.
So to whatever degree you can take the edge off of that process, and I think if it's the every other week check-in or the weekly one-on-one or the whatever it is, will make that end of the year more palatable.
Absolutely, because there will be no surprises at that point, right? You're working on things along the way, and it doesn't become something that hasn't been addressed.
Let's talk, Peter, about team assessment or team evaluation or even reflection. Have you ever seen a situation in a pastoral setting where a team goes off for a day, a half a day, they do some reflecting together on some common questions, and then they come back, and then there's a sense of, okay, we're doing it here, Have you ever seen that?
Sure. And I think I'll make a distinction between the team evaluation of the ministries and the team evaluation of how they're functioning, right? So both are important, and both require, ministry evaluation requires more information and data to bring to the conversation, because we're also assuming that not everyone on the team might be intimately involved with the different ministry activities. So there might be various levels there. It might go far beyond what I think we might be able to talk about in our time here today. But that can and should be done. What I think is equally, if not more important, perhaps, is how the team functions together. And we know that just having people doing good work is never going to help us achieve the ultimate visions we're looking for. It's always going to be dependent on how well the team functions together. For that, I've seen, to make a regular habit of at least once a year, where individuals are able to reflect on the different team members' contribution to working towards the current articulated vision. But in addition to that, there's another question, and it's sometimes phrased differently, but the essence of it is, one thing I'd like for this particular team member to do differently to help us achieve our vision is this. And the practice is that it always starts with the leader. Mm-hmm. So the leader is the one who receives the feedback first, mm-hmm. hearing from the rest of the group, what's the most important thing that this person has done, or something that somebody else hasn't shared yet, that has helped this group achieve the vision. And everyone goes around the circle. Then the second question, of course, they talk about one thing that they could do differently. They didn't do anything wrong per se, mm-hmm. but we're looking at the larger goal, something that I need to say to this individual to help us achieve where we're going. See the point of the question. And each person has the freedom to be able to articulate that to the individual. Mm-hmm. Most often, especially with teams that are working relatively well together, people are able to hear that information. When everyone's had the chance to speak about that, the individual is given the opportunity to articulate what is the one thing that they've heard that they're going to work on within the next year. Mm. So they're taking individual agency, not based on what the group has said, but what I've heard from the group, and I choose from what's been shared. That's going to contribute more to the group. Now, sometimes individuals might need to go off and think about that. So that might be a second step. We'll revisit that and come back again and share it. But you might do it in the moment because it's working well. That type of annual review about how we work together, it also not only gives us the opportunity to articulate how we're going to adjust how we work together as a group, but we're articulating it to each other, and it gives us permission to hold each other accountable. And that's an important element of it, because throughout the year we can and should be able to create opportunities to ask the question. And when that becomes a part of a regular cycle, we see that we're building and growing as a team to achieve the vision. And it's not about what I like and you like, Mike. It's about what we're doing together to reach that. If we could get into more of a practice of that alone, I think, could have significant consequences for how our ministry is reaching our goals that we're articulating.
Agreed. Yeah, no question. I think the best accountability comes when there's vulnerability, and then that builds trust. And if I know you care about me, then when you give me some feedback that might be a little crisp or a little bit difficult to receive, well, I know it's out of charity and professionalism, and we have a shared goal, so I'm much more likely to receive it well and then work towards that goal. We're almost out of time. We're so grateful for Peter Denio from Leadership Roundtable and your wisdom and your expertise in terms of this counsel for seasoned campus ministers. And the last question that I have, Peter, is, have you seen a value to campus ministers, directors in particular, people who've been in the field for a number of years, going outside to not shop around, but just spend some time with other highly performing campus ministries? Or have you seen a situation where a campus minister would invite outside observation, somebody from another campus, and they might just say, could you spend a day with us and tell us what you notice and what you see? Could there be any value to that outside set of eyes?
Sure. I think the short answer is yes, for sure. Anytime we're able to get a different perspective on our work in ministry or see what others are doing, just to grow and expand our own vision in ministry, I think is significant. In fact, I would offer that more than going to sometimes conferences or events where we get good ideas, which is always good, but to be able to set time aside and say, this campus ministry is known for doing this, and I want to know and understand it. To dedicate time and resources to go as a trip and not just bring one individual, but bring individuals who would be invested in that in the future. That might include some college students, and it could be very formational as well, or maybe board members, whatever, so that it becomes internalized and not just encapsulated with one individual, to go and visit and imagine differently and see how it's done. I think that approach, probably far more than having an individual come for a day or two, because as we know in campus ministry, the days are so different that it's hard to get an idea of what campus ministry looks like
in an average
day, and throughout the course of the year. If you're lucky enough to have somebody that you could benefit from their ideas, thoughts, and wisdom by inviting them to multiple things to get an idea, great. Or to have that person come and sit with individuals and listen to the stories of individuals who are participating in different ministries over the course of a year, and then reflect back some things. I think that could be very helpful. So I think those two things would be in particularly helpful for experienced ministers.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for being our guest.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mike.